G'day legends, with Christmas fast upon us, now is the perfect time to get in the workshop and make all your loved ones some really banging Chrissy presents to go under that tree. In this video, I've got 3 really fun, unique projects that you can knock out in a day that will make the perfect gift. So, let's get stuck into it. The concept for this first build was flat pack because, let's be honest, not all our friends and family live right next door, and sometimes you need to either post your presents or pack them into the car to take them with you. Now, I wanted to build something substantial to really have an impact. So I've decided the first project will be a 3-tiered shelving system that can completely flat pack and be reassembled with 0 tools. And to kick this project off, the first thing we need to do is decide how long we want our shelves. So I decided that my shelves will incrementally get bigger by 300 millimeters. So the first shelf I cut at 500 millimeters, the second at 800, and the third at 1100 millimeters. But you do you and make your shelves whatever size you want. From here, we need to decide how tall we want our shelf. I went with 1200 millimeters, so I docked it off on the miter saw, and then I'm going to turn my attention to milling this into legs. So I went over to the table saw, set my fence at 35 millimeters, and proceeded to cut 4 legs. I decided that I wanted to put a round over on all these legs, and I love how something as simple as a round over or a chamfer can just take things to that next level. I feel as woodworkers, our first instinct is to go over the top, over-engineer things, and just make things way more elaborate than they need to be. And quite often it's that overthinking that can actually hurt the piece aesthetically, when in reality something as simple as a nice chamfer or a round over or just paying attention to your sanding is what can really elevate the piece and make it aesthetically pleasing. So for me, woodworking is not about overbuilding. It's about having fun, paying attention to the details, and just slowly developing your skills. And whilst we're on the topic of details, I decided that I wanted to add that level of elevation to the shelving as well. So I went over to the belt sander and just rounded over those sharp corners. And from there, I went back to the router and added that same round over on all the shelves, top and bottom. And it goes without saying that all good woodworking pieces need to be sanded. And you probably already know this, but when you're sanding roundovers, it's really helpful to use one of those little foam pads that goes between the deck of your sander and the sandpaper. They just add a bit of cushioning, and rather than you trying to follow the shape of the roundover, the sandpaper and the foam pad naturally do it for you. And the only other milling we're going to need to do for this project is to make some little spaces to stick between the legs and also to stop the shelves sliding off. So I took a couple of 19mm Jarrah offcuts, set my fence to 19mm, and proceeded to cut a bunch of them. Now, you'll need 4 of these for every shelf you've got. Now, the assembly is actually really easy. We're basically going to just construct 2 ladders exactly the same size that will then join together at the top via a dowel pivot. So the first thing I'm going to do is take 6 of these spaces that will form the runs on the ladder and drill pilot holes in each end of them. This doesn't make sense now, but it will in a minute. The next step is to turn our attention back to the legs and mark the locations for some holes there. Now, we'll need to mark out a pivot hole in the top of every leg in the same location. From there, what you need to do is decide what spacing you want between your shelves, mark your locations, and then drill your pilot holes in those. So I'm using 8mm dowels for these. So I'm going to use an 8mm brad point bit and drill holes all the way through each leg for the pivot point. For the spaces, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to drill a 4mm through hole with an 8mm countersink that I can stick a dowel in later on and use to hide the screw heads. From here we can start the assembly, and all we need to do is take some screws, drive them through those legs and into those spaces to form 2 ladder sections. And to stick these 2 sections together, I'm just going to use 8mm dowels, but I'm not going to use any glue because I want these 2 pieces to be able to slide apart so they can be flat packed for shipping. And whilst I'm doing dowels, I'm also going to go ahead and plug all those holes to hide those screw heads. Once I've got everything doweled and plugged, I can go ahead and flush cut them, sand them, and everything's looking good.
And now we need to consider our shelf location. Now, like the rest of this build, this size and these parameters are completely unique to however you want to design and build yours. But I guess the point of this next step is to just stop the shelves from sliding off. Now, to achieve this, all I did was take those last 6 pieces that we cut earlier on the table saw, and I trimmed them down to a dimension that was slightly narrower than the width of the shelves. And then all we're going to do next is set up our A-frame, put our shelves in place, and mark our locations for where we want our little stopper feet to go. Now, something that I think is important to mention here is when you're marking out the locations for your stopper feet, make sure when you put them on the bottom of the shelf that they sit on the outside of the A-frame. If you have it on the inside of the A-frame, when you put weight on it, it would allow the legs to splay and your shelf could potentially collapse with all your relatives' valuable knickknacks and ornaments on there. And after a really nice generous coat of oil and giving that time to dry, this is what we end up with. Something beautiful, functional, and sure to be loved. The thing I love about this next project is its simplicity. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's boring. In fact, I've actually had a lot of success in giving these as gifts. And one of the most humbling and heartwarming things is after you've given someone a gift and you return to their house a week or a month later, it's still on display. And quite often the feedback is that piece that sits on the coffee table or the bar has been such a conversation starter and everyone asks about it. And if you're wondering what we're making, we are making pallet coasters. And just so we're clear, no, I'm not making coasters out of pallet woods. We are actually making miniature pallets to serve as coasters. However, you could definitely make these out of pallet wood. And the other thing I love about this project is it's a really great way to use up your scraps and your offcuts. For this particular set of pallet coasters, all I'm using is a piece of 19mm thick pine and I'm just cutting it into strips. So I'm going to need some 15mm wide strips to serve as the rails, and then the rest of the piece I'm going to cut into really thin strips that will form the slats on the top of the pallets. The good thing about making pallets is that they're square. So when making pallet coasters, it doesn't matter if it's the rails or the slats, all your pieces just get cut to the same size. From there, the assembly process is really simple. It's just crack out the little brad nailer and just start nailing them together. Starting with 2 rails, putting 2 slats on, and then just filling in all the gaps. The other thing that I really love about this project is that you don't need to be super precious. When you look at a pallet, it's usually got saw marks, some of the boards are uneven, and you can always see visible nails. But just because I'm making mine rustic doesn't mean you have to. If you want to sand these until your hands fall off, absolutely go for it. If you want to make these out of mahogany or ebony or whatever absurdly expensive wood, also go for it. But I think the reason people really love these is their novelty. They look like pallets, but the scale's really fun. And they're the sort of thing that you can just have on the bar or the coffee table and don't need to be precious about. In fact, you don't even really need to finish these. You can finish them if you want with some oil or some whatever. But if they get coffee spilt on them or a bit of red wine, it's not the end of the world. It just kind of adds to their palletness. So there you have it, a fun, simple woodworking project that makes an excellent stocking stuffer. And if you're after another crowd pleaser, you can't go past this beverage caddy. And I guess this is a little nod to yesteryear, back in the times before everything was just wrapped in plastic or came in cardboard. I'm designing mine to fit exactly 6 of my favorite beverages. However, you can customize it to whatever size you want. But this project isn't just limited to carting around beverages. In fact, it's really versatile when you think about it. You could use it for all sorts of things like taking your sauces and condiments out to the barbecue, or even taking it down to collect your chicken eggs. But I don't have chickens and I enjoy a beer, so I'm going to build mine to accommodate beers. Now, there's a few things to consider when making this. One is the ergonomics. You don't want to be busting your knuckles every time you want to grab a beverage out of this thing. So I've just come up with an angle that I find aesthetically pleasing and offers great accessibility. Now, I'm trying to keep all these projects as simple as possible because we all know how stressful this time of year is and how time poor everybody is. And I know that everybody has so much going on at this time of year. So the last thing I want to do is put out a bunch of overly complicated projects. My hope here is that you can get out in the workshop, rummage through your scrap pile, make some really cool gifts for your loved ones, and just switch your brain off for a day and just enjoy doing something with your hands without adding to the mental load. And whilst we're on the subject of stress and mental load, If you've been following my journey, you will know that I'm in the midst of a massive interstate move, which requires packing up my entire life, including my house, 2 businesses and 2 puppies, and doing a several thousand kilometer trip back to Victoria, which is originally my home state. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you stick around because there's some really big things coming up for Dino Builds on the other side of this whole journey. So far, you've seen me construct 2 sides and a base and screw it all together. And now we need to come up with a way to stop these bottles from falling out. So I've just gone through my scraps pile and I've pulled out a couple of really thin strips of jarrah, and I'm just going to cut them down to size and just screw them onto the side of this with a couple of brass screws. Super simple, super clean, no need to overcomplicate it. Now you could totally just brad nail these on, or even just a couple dobs of glue would probably be sufficient. But I find the brass screws just add a little bit of contrast, and that's always a really good way to add a little visual impact to the piece. And the only other thing left to do in the construction side of this piece is to build a handle. Now I'm not too proud to admit that the handle in this piece was a complete oversight for me up until this point. I actually didn't allow enough space for the handle. I originally wanted to just do a straight dowel handle, but I realized that I didn't allow enough height within the piece for my hands to comfortably fit in there between the bottles. So I've decided to do a stepped handle, which turned out to be such an amazing aesthetic choice in the end. So happy accident, I guess. So once I have my shape marked out, I just put some holes in with the Forstner bit just to create a bit of curve and a bit of contour on the handle. Took it over to the bandsaw, cut the shape out, and then I'm going to take it over to the belt sander, fine tune it just to soften all those hard edges. But the radius on my belt sander is too large for the inside of the handle, so I turn to my Dremel just to fine tune things and smoothen things out. After that, I just put a round over on everything, and then I attached it to the beverage holder. And I know you might think it's weird that I'm countersinking brass button head screws in this piece, but the reason I'm doing that is because I'm in the middle of a move, and these are the screws that I had. They weren't quite long enough, so countersinking them was a really effective way to get a bit more length and a bit more purchase into the handle. For pieces like this, I'd usually use my favorite Gillies orange oil. However, I'd run out and I don't really feel like going to buy some more, being that I'm in the middle of a move. So I tried something I'd never used before, and it's called hard burnishing oil. I have no idea what it's actually for, but it worked out really, really well. If you have any idea what hard burnishing oil is or what it's actually used for, drop me a comment and let me know. And there you have it, guys. 3 awesome gift ideas. So get in the workshop, make some sawdust, have some fun, and I'll catch you on the next one, legends. Peace.